Nobody told you this. And honestly, maybe they never planned to. Think about someone you know, a friend, a cousin, maybe someone you follow online, who just seems to be building. Quietly. Consistently. While everyone else is still figuring out what to do with the weekend. You've probably looked at that person and thought, what does he know that I don't? I thought the same thing for years. And the answer wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a side hustle. It wasn't even discipline, not in the way we usually talk about it. It was something deeper. Something that lives in the mind long before it shows up in a bank account. The people who build wealth young don't think differently about money. They think differently about themselves. And that distinction, quiet as it is, changes everything. There's a moment most people never talk about. It usually happens somewhere between 19 and 25. You're not a kid anymore, but you're not quite settled either. And somewhere in that window, in a random Tuesday, in a parking lot, at 11 p.m. scrolling through your phone, something shifts. For some people, that moment passes. Life moves on. The feeling fades. But for others, something locks in. Not ambition. Not hunger. Something quieter than that. A kind of clarity. I've watched people from both groups. Same starting point, similar backgrounds, similar opportunities. And 10 years later, they're living completely different lives. Not because one got lucky, but because one made a decision in that moment that the other didn't even notice was available. The decision wasn't about money. It was about identity. Who am I going to be inside a system that was never designed to make me wealthy? Because here's what no one says out loud, the default path, school, job, spend, repeat, was built for consumption, not accumulation. It was designed by people who needed workers, not owners. And the ones who figure that out early don't rage against it. They don't post about it. They just quietly step to the side. They stop playing the game everyone else is playing. And they start building something that belongs to them. That's not a mindset tip. That's a psychological rupture. And it happens differently for everyone, but it always starts with one uncomfortable question. What if everything I was taught about money was taught to me by someone who never had any? There's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Delayed gratification. You've heard it. You probably rolled your eyes at it. I don't blame you. Because the way it's usually taught, it sounds like punishment. Like you're supposed to suffer now so maybe, hopefully, eventually, things get better. That's not what I saw in the people who actually built something young. What I saw was different. What I saw was a quiet trade. Not sacrifice. A trade. They weren't depriving themselves. They were redirecting. Every dollar that didn't go to something forgettable went somewhere intentional. Every hour that didn't dissolve into noise became material for something real. And the key, the thing nobody teaches, is that they found meaning in the building itself. Not in the arrival. In the process of becoming someone who could carry wealth without being destroyed by it. Because that's the part people skip over. Money doesn't just reveal character. It amplifies it. Whatever you were before the money, that's what gets louder. The insecurity. The generosity. The recklessness. The discipline. All of it, louder. So the ones who build young aren't just learning to save or invest. They're learning to become a container strong enough to hold what they're building toward. That's the real work. And it's invisible from the outside. You see the results, the apartment, the business, the portfolio, and you think, he got lucky or he had help or something fell into place. But what you don't see is the 3 years before that. The months of choosing boring over exciting. The Friday nights that looked like failure from the outside but were actually construction. Brick by brick. Quietly. While no one was watching. Let me tell you something about fear. Not the fear of losing money. The other one. The one that's harder to name. The fear of becoming someone your current circle doesn't recognize anymore. This one is real. And it stops more people than any bad investment ever could. Because when you start making different choices, when you stop going out every weekend, when you start talking about assets instead of things, when your priorities quietly shift, people notice. And not always in a supportive way. Some will joke about it. Some will question it. Some will go quiet in a way that says more than words. And here's the brutal part, most people, when they feel that social friction, they stop. They pull back. They shrink the ambition back down to a size that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. They choose belonging over becoming. And I understand that. Completely. Because humans are wired for tribe. Rejection, even subtle rejection, triggers something ancient in us. Something that says, blend in or be left behind. But the ones who build wealth young learn to sit with that discomfort without letting it make their decisions. They don't become cold. They don't become isolated. They don't post quotes about leaving people behind. They just get very quiet about what they're building. And very intentional about who they let into that space. There's a certain kind of loneliness in early wealth building that nobody romanticizes. It's not dramatic. It's just the specific silence of a Saturday night when everyone else is spending and you're reading, studying, planning, and you have to be okay with that. Not forever. But for now. And the ones who can hold that silence without breaking, without numbing it with spending, without abandoning the path just to feel normal again, those are the ones who come out the other side with something solid. Something that's actually theirs. Not borrowed. Not performed. Built. There's a pattern I kept noticing. The people who build wealth young almost never talk about getting rich. They talk about systems. They talk about margin. They talk about not needing to make a desperate decision because they engineered their life so that desperation doesn't have leverage over them. That's the real goal. Not the number. The position. Think about what it means to never have to take a job just because you need the money. To never have to stay in a relationship, a city, a situation, because you can't afford to leave. To never have to say yes when every part of you is saying no. That's not wealth as a fantasy. That's wealth as freedom of movement. And the psychology behind building that kind of position is fundamentally different from the psychology of chasing a lifestyle. Lifestyle chasers are always performing. They're buying things that signal arrival. They're spending toward an image of success rather than the infrastructure of it. Builders are different. They're obsessed with the gap between what comes in and what goes out. Not because they're cheap. Because they understand that gap is oxygen. That gap is options. That gap is the raw material of every future choice they'll ever get to make freely. And here's where it gets interesting. The more you protect that gap, the more you resist the pressure to fill it with consumption, the more your brain starts to change. Slowly. Subtly. You stop seeing money as something you earn and spend. You start seeing it as something you deploy. Like energy. Like time. Something that can either evaporate or compound, depending entirely on the decision you make in the next 30 seconds. That shift in perception is worth more than any salary increase. Because a person who sees money as a tool will always outbuild a person who sees money as a reward. One is building a machine. The other is feeding a feeling. And feelings, however real, however valid, have never built anything that lasts. There's something that happens around year 2 or 3 of building quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one day like a shift in weather. You stop needing external proof that you're on the right track. And that, more than any financial milestone, is when things start to accelerate. Because up until that point, you're still fighting yourself. Still second-guessing. Still measuring your progress against people who aren't even playing the same game. Still wondering if the sacrifices are worth it. Still looking for someone to tell you you're doing the right thing. But somewhere in year 2 or 3, the internal narrative changes. Not because life gets easier. It doesn't. But because you've accumulated enough evidence, quiet, personal, unsexy evidence, that the process works. That you work. That the version of you making these decisions today is fundamentally different from the one who started. And that realization is its own kind of wealth. Psychologists call it internal locus of control. The deep belief that your outcomes are primarily the result of your own choices, not luck, not circumstance, not what someone else did or didn't do for you. The people who build young have this in common. Not arrogance. Not the denial of hardship or privilege or systemic barriers. But a refusal, quiet and absolute, to outsource the authorship of their own life. They don't wait for conditions to be perfect. They don't wait for the economy to cooperate. They don't wait for the right moment, the right mentor, the right signal. They build in the mess. They build in the uncertainty. They build while still afraid, still doubting, still figuring it out. Because waiting for certainty before starting is just fear with better vocabulary. And they know that. The market will always be volatile. The timing will never be perfect. Life will always have a reason, a very convincing, very reasonable reason, to delay. The ones who build young simply decide that the delay is more expensive than the risk. And then they move. Quietly. Consistently. Without waiting for applause. If you've made it this far into the video with me, I want to pause for just a second. Not to break the rhythm, but because this matters. If what we've been talking about is landing for you, if something in this conversation is hitting different from the usual financial content you find online, then I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. We put out content every single day. Not noise. Not hacks. Not shortcuts dressed up as wisdom. Just honest, grounded thinking about money, psychology, and building a life that actually belongs to you. Hit that subscribe button. And bring someone with you who needs to hear this. Because here's the thing. The people who need this most are usually the ones who think it isn't for them. The ones sitting in jobs they don't love, spending money they haven't saved, performing a version of success that was never really theirs. Maybe that's someone you know. Maybe it was you 6 months ago. Maybe it's still you right now, and that's okay. That's exactly why you're here. And speaking of being here, there's one more piece to this psychology that most people never reach. Because most people stop just before the hardest shift of all. Not the shift in habits. Not the shift in spending. The shift in how you see time. The people who build wealth young have a relationship with time that is almost unsettling to those around them. They think in decades while everyone else thinks in weekends. They plant trees they won't sit under for years. They make decisions today for a version of themselves they haven't met yet. And that version, the one they're building toward, isn't some fantasy. It's a direction. A compass point they wake up oriented toward every single morning. Not with excitement. Not with motivation. With something quieter and more durable than both. With intention. So here's where we land. Not with a list. Not with a framework. Not with 5 steps to financial freedom. Just with a truth that's been sitting underneath everything we've talked about today. The brutal psychology of people who build wealth young isn't brutal because it's harsh. It's brutal because it's honest. It requires you to look at your life, clearly, without excuses, without the comfortable stories you tell yourself at night, and ask a single question. Am I building something? Or am I just moving through time? Because time moves regardless. The months stack up. The years pass. And one day you look up and either you have something to show for the decisions you made in the quiet moments, or you don't. There's no villain in that story. No system to blame, no person who held you back. Just choices. Compounding. Silently. In one direction or another. The people who build young understand this not as pressure, but as permission. Permission to start before they're ready. Permission to move before they have all the answers. Permission to become, slowly and imperfectly, someone who knows how to carry what they're building. They're not special. They're not smarter. They didn't get a different hand. They just decided, in one quiet, ordinary moment, that the version of their future self who had built something real was worth the discomfort of today. And then they got to work. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's a line that has stayed with me for years. From Proverbs 13 verse 11. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Little by little. That's the whole strategy. That's the whole psychology. Not a sprint. A direction. Sustained. Quiet. Relentless. If this video meant something to you, hit that subscribe button and share it with 5 people who need to hear this. Not because it helps the channel. Because someone in your life is sitting at a crossroads right now and doesn't know it yet. And drop a comment below, tell me something sincere. Did this land? What shifted for you? And tell me what you want me to cover next. What's the conversation you haven't found yet? I'll build it for you. I'll see you in the next one.